Ever wonder what separates high performers from the rest? It's not luck, it's not talent, it's the 10 types of things that they do every single day. From ruthless prioritization to relentless follow through, it's the real grind. Let's break it down. Everyone talks about high performers, but not a lot of people can tell you what they actually do. Some people think it's talent or intelligence. It's not. It's habits, it's behavior, and discipline. They're not superhuman. They just do certain things consistently. And I'm going to break down what those things are and the things that they do that others don't. They're people who deliver. They combine clarity, discipline, ownership, and execution into daily habits. They don't wait for direction. They create momentum and solve problems. They raise the bar for themselves and everyone around them. They make complex work look simple because they've mastered a set of fundamentals. These behaviors are repeatable and learnable, and we're going to talk about each of them. So, what are the 10 things that they do? Well, they learn stuff, they clarify stuff, they prioritize stuff, they optimize stuff, they execute stuff, they elevate, they anticipate stuff, they communicate stuff, they own stuff, and finally, they prioritize stuff. So let's get into each one of these items, talk about what they do and how they do it, because I think you can learn and do every one of these things just the same. So, first, and I think this is the most important to start with, they learn stuff. They absorb new skills and tools and insights constantly, looking into information, learning about what they want to do. They're continuously building the skills that make them successful and staying curious to understanding new methods and ideas. In the project space, a few years ago, it was Agile, and then it became learning about, now it's AI, right? So there's all these different concepts and things that come in, seeking feedback instead of avoiding it, learning about themselves, turning mistakes into data, and studying patterns and trends and best practices, upgrading as the world changes. Even with AI, it's changing so quickly, and learning is a competitive advantage. For 30 years, I have done this with every single word I don't know, every acronym I don't know. I look it up or I ask somebody. And now with AI, you have a virtual mentor at your fingertips. You can ask them any question. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to learn things. And how do they do that? Well, they read, they watch, they listen to content, whether that's podcasts, news articles, or so on, asking for feedback to understand how they're performing and how they're being perceived, and reflecting. Practice being deliberate and not random with your information. Surround yourself with people who challenge them and that you learn from. Taking courses or micro learning, again, there's no shortage of content out there. If you're watching this video, you're already doing that. And applying the new knowledge immediately so that it sticks. So the most important one, I think the first one, is that they learn stuff as much as possible. And then there's clarifying. Right. So they ask questions, define targets to make sure that they understand what done actually means, cutting through the noise to getting to the real problem. I mean, how many times are you in meetings where people are just rambling or there's an action and it's not clear what's being asked? So asking those questions, and they're necessary to understand what the intent actually is, defining what the success is. So what are you trying to get out of this request so that expectations are aligned, people and teams, everyone knows what we're talking about. You're taking this vague idea and you're making it into a particular action, removing the ambiguity before it becomes rework. And oh, I thought you meant this, but you actually meant that. And so that everybody knows what good looks like. Well, how do they do that? They just start by saying, well, what does done mean? What is the definition of what we're actually talking about? What are we trying to get to? Summarizing is a great technique. Here's what I think I heard. Let me repeat that back to you. Challenging assumptions and constraints. I think you mean this. Is that what you actually meant? Breaking things down into smaller pieces to make sure that you can test it and try it out and say, hey, this is what I think you're saying. Documenting decisions is so important so nothing gets lost and you're not constantly relitigating the same information, and follow-up questions until the fog clears. So the second is clarifying stuff. The third is prioritizing. There's a lot of work that we do, and high performers don't treat everything as urgent. They prioritize, they sequence, and they focus on what's the most important thing. What is the highest impact work, and sequencing that work to maximizing the momentum, because otherwise you're going to be in this model where everything seems urgent and you're spending time on low value distractions, and you really want to protect that time. You're going to want to make trade-offs so that you're not trying to do it all. You're working on those things that impact the most, or maybe there's a fire drill and you have to work on that, but sometimes that happens, and that's that adjusting priority when reality changes, because it will. And how do high performers do this? Well, sometimes there's different ranking systems of what must I work on, what should I work on, what could I work on. Blocking time, I do this. I block off my calendar. If I have more than 2 or 3 meetings in a row, I will block off the calendar and make sure that people that I have the desk time to think through things or to follow up things. And I'm horrible at this, but saying no or not now, right? Maybe it's not no. Maybe it's, I'll get to this later. Reassessing the priorities and understanding really what moves the needle, what is making forward progress, and pushing back when priorities conflict. And sometimes this requires using your boss or somebody else if it's a more senior ask. High performers optimize stuff. I call this the consultative mindset, constantly thinking about how do I make things better, not just accepting things for what they are, but how can I make this workflow, this tool more efficient, right? Maybe there's steps or friction or waste that get removed. And this is streamlining processes, removing tools, wasted time. There's so much inefficiency in business, and spending time looking at that, saying, hey, I think we can make this better and faster is always a good thing. And how do they do that? Well, there's automation, right? AI is a great way of optimizing your time now with maybe standard templates and checklists, analyzing why is something taking so long and understanding what that is so that you can remove them or speed them up. Data is so important to refine decisions and recommendations. Test things out. I'm doing that with AI where I'm testing out some theories of ways that it might eliminate some time in status reporting. And it may not work, but you're testing it out. You're not investing a ton of time, but the upside could be much more significant. And looking at what other teams do and borrowing best practices. And so, look, just constantly thinking about how do I optimize things. The fifth thing, and maybe this is towards the top too, is high performers get things done consistently. They deliver, they do the things they say they're going to do, they hit the deadlines without drama, or more importantly, without being followed up on 10 times. If you've listened to my videos, it's one of my big pet peeves of the amount of time that we have to spend following up with people to do the things they said they were going to do. High performers don't require that. They hit the deadlines, they turn the plans into outcomes, they get things done, and that builds the credibility with them, even if things aren't perfect or they don't have all the information. So I always view executing stuff as one of the best indicators of a high performer. Well, how do they do that? They break work down into manageable chunks. They track the progress that they understand where they're making the progress. They remove blockers instead of waiting or saying, well, it's not my problem. They maintain momentum, just continually moving things forward, making lots of lists. I make a ton of lists, asking for help early, right? If you think that there's something that could accelerate things, and just getting early iterations for people to react to. So you want to be a high performer. To me, this is non-negotiable. You have to deliver on the things you say. Then there's elevating, improving quality, pushing standards, making the people around them better. They raise the standards for themselves and others. They improve the quality of the work that you, right? They don't just accept sort of low quality, and thinking about how do I constantly make things better. To me, this is part of that sort of consultative mindset as well of how do I continue to elevate the team and make the team better. They share knowledge versus hiding it. They mentor others, and they just bring, a certain amount of energy, and they just make things better than they were before. And how do they do that? It's giving feedback. It's modeling the behaviors that they expect and celebrating wins, teaching frameworks, not just answers, right? Not just giving the answer, but teaching other people how to do things, encouraging that experimentation. Just try it out, see what happens, sharing tools and templates, and then holding themselves accountable if things aren't going well. So high performers elevate the people around them. I call it sort of a multiplier, right? They make the people around them better. They're a multiplier for the team. High performers also anticipate things. So they're not just reacting to the crisis of the day, but they're thinking ahead. They're seeing the problems before they're happening and preparing so that when they do happen, or if they do happen, they're prepared for that. So that's identifying the risks, making sure there's backup plans, looking for interdependencies, and what I call sort of connecting the dots that others might miss, and thinking several steps ahead so that you're preventing the fires instead of just reacting to them. Well, and how do they do that? They're constantly thinking about what could go wrong. This is probably a function of the anxiety that I have because I naturally think that something's going to go wrong, and so maybe it's my anxiety that makes me think about this. But it's building contingency plans, monitoring for early warning signals, and keeping communications open. And like I've talked about before, running those small tests and then adjusting the plans. Things are going to change, and that's fine. Just constantly adjusting things. Number 8, high performers communicate things. They share updates early and often. There's no surprises. There's no, oh, I thought you know. There's keeping stakeholders aligned and reducing confusion and making complex things simple. It's not, yes, they communicate, but they're not, paragraphs of content. It's just simple, concise bullets with the key points highlighted so that there's not surprises. You're keeping people engaged and informed, and transparency is one of my favorite words, right? You're building that trust through transparency. Well, and how do they do that? I mentioned short, structured updates, not essays, confirming understandings. Tailoring to the audience is so important. Executives read things differently than maybe a detailed programmer or coder would. Flagging the risks and asking clarifying questions we've talked about, and just keeping the messages concise and actionable, right? What does the audience need to know from this communication? Number 9, and this is one of my most critical attributes that I look for in people and high performers, is they just own stuff. They take responsibility for the outcomes, not just the tasks, right? They take care of something, they treat it as if it's their own. It's unbelievable the amount of people who will tell you that's not my job, or they don't treat something like they own it. These people take responsibility for outcomes. They don't blame or deflect. They just fix the problems. They follow through on the things they're going to say, and they hold themselves to a higher standard. That's my point of they don't need to be followed up on 20 times. And that builds trust and accountability. They treat the work as if it's theirs. And I don't think enough people do that in today's business world. And how do they do that? It's fine admitting mistakes. Yep, you know what? I own that. I made the mistake. Let's make it better. But when there is a positive, they share that. They share the credit. They take the lead when things go sideways. They take care of the things that they say they're going to do. And then they ask for the feedback on it. They track the commitments and deadlines, and they do the things they're going to say, and they communicate openly. And enough people just don't do this. And finally, they protect stuff. They guard their time, the energy, and the focus, and they say no so that they're setting boundaries and avoiding distractions. They're not focusing on low value work, and I'm so bad at this with the amount of time that I spend on just BS work. They maintain the routines, they protect their mental and emotional bandwidth, and they keep the priorities safe so that they get the things done that they need to. Well, how do they do this? They block time, they use routines, they limit the interruptions, and I'm not great at this either, but I think this is probably one of the most important techniques we can figure out how to do is just stay focused. And therefore that may require declining tasks that don't align with our goals. Turning off notifications, I do this as well so that I don't get the constant pings of every message popping up because I do get distracted easily. And communicating boundaries. So here's the 10 things, bringing it all together. The high performers succeed because they do the right stuff consistently. They clarify and prioritize and optimize before they even execute. But when they do execute, they do the things they say they're going to do. They elevate the people around them and anticipate problems. They're good communicators, and they're constantly learning and protecting their time and energy. And when you do all of these things, it compounds, and that's why these people stand out. And so, look, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to practice these behaviors consistently to make yourself more reliable, more effective. You want to protect your focus and invest in your growth. And I do believe these skills are learnable and repeatable. And when you do them, I think they're very visible to the people around you. So start doing these because I think it does separate high performers from everybody else. I probably missed a few techniques, so throw them in there or let me know what you think. But thanks for watching this video.